Quiet on set. Picture is up. All right, roll sound.
Rolling.
Roll cameras.
Cam's rolling.
And 3, 2.
Hey everybody, what's going on? Been a while since we've been in here. We've been on a little bit of a hiatus. Mark Hogan isn't with me today. He's still on vacation. Much deserved. He's a hard-working guy and decided to do some time out at the deer lease. Wish I could be with him. Can't blame him for doing it. And hope you're having a good time there, Hogan. Gang, today I wanted to talk about something that's kind of near and dear to me and something that should be near and dear to you too. And I wanted to start out with a pretty quick question. What is your citizenship score? And, it's interesting because I didn't even know I had a citizenship score, but it appears that we all do. And we all have things like citizenship scores and criminal threat factors and terroristic threat factors. And I think it's interesting that the average American person would have such a thing, but it appears that we all do. So here's the deal. I just finished Edward Snowden's book, Permanent Record. Great book. I enjoyed it. It was a good read. And I kind of knew what was going on in the book anyway to start out with, but I wanted to grab it, and it came across one of my feeds, and I snatched it up and said, hey, I'm going to read this book in its entirety and see what I can get out of it and how it makes me feel and how it should make you guys feel too. I'm telling you, the stuff that's in this book blew my mind. So if you don't know Edward Snowden, he's a whistleblower. And back in 2013, he provided some documents to several journalists, and he was in Hong Kong at the time, that basically blew the whistle on programs such as PRISM and Stellar Wind and TSP and some other programs that the NSA had put together that basically created a big dragnet and created a program of mass surveillance for everybody's electronic devices. Crazy. I mean, because it's so futuristic, it just doesn't even sound possible. But not only was it possible, but they've done it, and they continue to do it today, and it's a really, really bad thing. So let's try to grab the scope of what I'm talking about here. To begin with, Edward Snowden was a systems analyst and a systems engineer. And if you guys don't know what that is, he's an individual who takes care of a computer network. He helps design facets of that network. He manages the network and administers over it and makes sure it operates flawlessly and stores all the items that it's supposed to store and does the things that it's supposed to do in a secure environment. Now, places like the NSA, the National Security Administration, and the CIA, they have big data to start out with. I mean, they accumulate, store, and categorize a massive amount of data. And so to be a systems analyst in one of those situations, you got to be pretty good. And Ed Snowden found himself in kind of a unique position because both of his parents came out of the intelligence community anyway. So he pretty much had a head start into that whole game. He had applied for security clearances early on, knowing that that was the direction his life was going to take him in. And this was shortly after 2001, 9/11, and he had this internal desire to serve his country and do what he could. He tried to join the military. He had some problems and failed at that, unfortunately, but decided to go the NSA route because he really thought that he would be doing the right thing for his country and his countrymen. And I'm glad that he did it. So in the book, Permanent Record, it gives a chronological series of how he came about to get into the NSA, how he discovered the programs he discovered, how he actually got that material, got it out of the NSA, and gave it to the journalist, and what his life has become since then. So it's a great book. It's a good read. It's a bit complicated in areas, especially if you're not familiar with technology and the things that are possible. So, and years ago, I had a gut feeling that all of this big data would someday, because we were doing it at a company I was working for, we were accumulating and storing and categorizing data. It was a different type, but we were doing it, and I knew that eventually that was going to be the game. That was going to be the thing. But I hadn't considered that our government would do it. I don't know why. I always thought it would be something that would be corporate for profit. And it's unfortunate the way that it's taken its turn. So let's move back to 9/11. Okay, so 9/11, bad experience. Everybody knows what I'm talking about. And it changed the way we think and live and work. And it scared the hell out of everybody, especially the people in government. So they started to institute different programs. They started to create new legislation. They started to put together new government entities. One of the things that came out of 9/11 was a Patriot Act. And I've made my statements about the Patriot Act on this podcast before. I think it's a piss poor, pitiful piece of legislation that came about when people were concerned and frightened and scared and they weren't thinking properly. And I think it needs to be repealed, or at least large portions of it do. I don't agree with it. And, well, we'll just go from there. So let's get back to Ed Snowden. So anyway, so in his book, he reveals that he came across a program, Stellar Wind, that basically accumulated data from internet service providers. And this was not raw data or content. So in layman's terms, let's take a look at the average email. So you write an email to your girlfriend and you send it to her. She gets it. She reads it. The actual email portion itself is the content. The metadata from that email, which is the important information actually, and everybody thinks that metadata, since it's behind the scenes, it doesn't matter. But metadata is big because it's more specific than the actual content itself. It is what time you sent that mail, from what IP address you sent that email, to whom you sent it, from where you sent it, the duration of it, how long it took the person to read it, if there were attachments to it, what those attachments were. And there's some other pertinent information as well that goes along with every piece of email you send or receive. We call it metadata. Now, in addition to that, when you go online and you start searching in Google and things like that, you're, again, creating massive amounts of metadata. Well, the government realized they could take this metadata and they could bucketize it. And that's my own term because I wanted to make it more understandable for the average person. So imagine you've got a whole bunch of buckets and you can take this portion of information, put it in this bucket, this portion, and this portion, and this portion in each bucket. And in each bucket, you drop a key in that coordinates that particular portion. So whenever you want to get all those portions together, you call upon that key and you can retrieve all the data out of those buckets that coordinate with that key. So they take this data and they start to accumulate it and they start to disseminate it, categorize it, store it. And what they're looking for in the beginning of the program, I believe, were certain terms, certain people that were getting together and emailing each other. They were looking for terrorist activities. But I think they realized that it was all the extraneous data that was important also. And they wanted to keep that data on every person in the world for several reasons. Number one, they had it. It was easy for them to get. Number two, it was easy for them to store. Number three, it was automatic for them to bucketize and categorize. And number four, it gave them the ability to pull data on any individual they ever wanted to in the past, present, and future. Now, is this legal? They claim that it doesn't circumvent the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution because they can gather all the data they want. It becomes illegal once they look at it. I call bullshit on that because, as Edward Snowden talks about in his book, there's a program called X-Keyscore. And X-Keyscore is like the SQL command for that particular database. So you can look up any individual you want. You can look up any IP address you want. You can look up any wireless network you want. You can look up any search term you want, and it'll pull all those various pieces of data out of those buckets and combine them together and give them whatever they want. And you might think, well, Hank, I don't care. I've got nothing to hide, and they can get all this data they want. But what you don't understand is the fact that it leaves you in a situation where you have zero privacy. So you never have a reasonable expectation of privacy. And I want you to know and remember this term, because this is the most important term you'll probably ever hear when it comes to your freedoms, when it comes to your liberties, and when it comes to being autonomous in this country. You should have a reasonable expectation of privacy when you are at home. You should have a reasonable expectation of privacy when you are in your vehicle. You should have a reasonable expectation of privacy even in certain situations when you are at work. But with the present state of surveillance, the only reasonable expectation of privacy that you actually have are the thoughts within your noggin. So as long as you're not typing those thoughts out or articulating those thoughts, as I am right now, you should have a reasonable expectation of privacy. Now that fragment of existence that makes you autonomous, if that doesn't scare the hell out of you, you're not thinking clearly. You're still wrapped up in something else. So you got to really consider what's going on here. What I'm saying is this. If you have a cell phone and your cell phone is a smartphone and you can't remove the battery, you have absolutely zero guarantee that when your cell phone is off, it's off. According to some statements that Edward Snowden has made, they're still able to track cell phones even when they're off. So if your cell phone is constantly pinging the nearest cell tower and saying something to the effect of, hey, if I get a text or I get a phone call, here I am. And as you move throughout the day in your travels, your cell phone is constantly pinging a different cell tower saying, here I am, and all that information is being logged, and it's all being placed in buckets, and it's all identified through your individual key, then they've got you. They know what you do. They know what you do 24 hours a day. They know where you are 24 hours a day. Every cell phone has a microphone attached to it, and not a crappy one either. A pretty damn good mic. If you want an idea of how great of a mic it is, make a phone call, put it on speakerphone, set it on the table, and start to move away from it while you're still talking, and you will be surprised how well the individual on the other side can hear you from a distance. Get two cell phones in the same room, now they're listening to everything you're doing in stereo. So, is there someone on the other line actually listening? Is there someone out there at the NSA actually listening to your phone calls and maybe just what's going on in your home? Probably not. But here's the problem. They easily could. Between probably not and easily could is merely the flip of a switch, and that's it. And it shouldn't be that way. No one is allowed in your private life. At least no one should be allowed in your private life without your authorization or without a warrant. And that warrant has to be issued by a judge. And there has to be probable cause. And due process has to be followed to obtain that warrant. They can't just flip a switch and start listening to and monitoring your every move. And that's the state of affairs that we live in right now. I know you guys are worried about a lot of this COVID stuff, vaccines, and they're taking away our rights and this, that, and the other. And hey, I can see your point. But if you're not seriously concerned about the state of surveillance in the world today, you're uninformed and you have no idea what's going on. Let's take Facebook, for instance. Facebook is one of the biggest culprits there is. The FBI even stopped using a lot of their tools that they specifically put together to surveil people because Facebook gives it all to them. Think about it for a minute. You go to Facebook and you look at the 3 or 4 years you've been on it. You can look at every post you've made. You can look at how many people wished you a happy birthday, what you've been doing, where you've traveled to, who you've hung around with. There's plenty of pictures of you, plenty of identifying symbols. There's everything the FBI would ever need to put together a timeline of your entire life. Now, should it be that way? No, it shouldn't, but it is that way. And you think, well, all the stuff I didn't want on Facebook, I deleted. You deleted it to yourself, but believe me, that data's still there. It stays there, and it never, ever, ever goes away. It lives in perpetuity. So all the searches that you've made on Google have been logged. All of the stuff you put on Facebook has been logged. Every phone call, every text, every email that you've sent or received has been logged, and all that metadata is there. Now, what are they going to do with it? I have no idea. I'm sure from time to time they use it for investigations that they need to use it for. I still don't think it's necessary, advantageous, or legal for them to collect it on me and you. I'd like to give you an excerpt just out of the Fourth Amendment. This is just a short piece. Okay, it says, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated. Well, there you have it. That's straight out of the Constitution right there. But our government always finds a way to circumvent the Constitution. By one means or another, they'll do it. Now, Ed Snowden, unfortunately, lives in Russia now. He tried to escape Hong Kong. He knew he was going to have charges pressed against him for espionage and treason. Of course, he did. And he's got a great legal team. They've been working for years, since 2013, actually, to get the charges dropped and put him in a better situation. But the government's never going to allow this to stand. What we need to do as individuals is we need to learn counterintelligence. We need to learn how to circumvent these types of surveillance and bring our autonomy back to us. And the first thing I think that we can do as human beings is to realize how connected we are. You know, and I'm certainly more guilty of this probably than most because I'm kind of in the business. I have a cell phone with me 24 hours a day wherever I go. And when I go home at night, I plug it in. It's on my nightstand next to the bed, constantly pinging that tower saying, here I am, here I am. And by the way, here's Hank Vatt, because he's always got me on his side. I'm unaware of how to disable the microphone on that to where I'd be sure it would be done. And so there's no telling what has been recorded. There's no telling what has been bucketized just from my cell phone alone. Also, I have several wireless networks that I manage right here on my own property. And we've split them up for reasons, and those reasons are private. They're ours. But I'm sure that plenty of information has been gathered from those wireless networks as well. All of my Google searches, I'm sure, have been gathered, as well as most of the remarks I've made on YouTube, most of the videos I've done, and most of the things that I've put on Facebook as well. And I'm not happy about it. I don't have anything to hide. I'm not a terrorist. I'm not any of that kind of stuff, so I'm not concerned about any of that. But I am concerned about the fact that my reasonable expectation of privacy has been removed, and I no longer have that anywhere that I go. So what I recommend is this. If you can, if you're interested, if it's something you want to do, try to see if you can maintain even an hour of complete disconnectedness. So in other words, get your autonomy back. And I hate to use this word, but we're all cyborgs to a certain degree because we're all connected at the hip. We've got our cell phones, we've got our wireless networks, even your smart TV. Your smart TV has some technology built into it. And excuse me while I find it real quick, because I was doing some research earlier. And yeah, they have automatic content recognition software. And that's what it is they watch what you watch on TV, and they log and keep that. They sell it to third parties, And they try to use that. Basically, they claim it's for you, but I say it's against you to try to sell you products that they feel are specifically geared just for your interests. I don't like that idea. I think it changes the way that people think long term. I think it changes the way people consider what they want long term. And it, again, helps to remove our autonomy. And I think that's wrong. So there's another thing out there that I want you guys to be aware of called the third party doctrine. And the third party doctrine pretty much simply states that any information that is provided to a third party is no longer yours, and you no longer have a reasonable expectation of privacy. The third party doctrine is a United States legal doctrine, and it holds that people that voluntarily give their information to third parties, such as banks, phone companies, internet service providers, and email servers, have no reasonable expectation of privacy. And I disagree with the third party doctrine, and here's the reason why. If I send an email to my wife, and that email is about something that's private within our lives, that's still our information. That's still our communication. Just because I used a third party to send that information doesn't mean that they own it. And they can't take it and sell that information or bucketize it or use it against me. And that's exactly what's going on. And I know what you're probably thinking. Well, Hank, what are you going to do? You can't get offline. You can't not use email. You can't not use your cell phone. You can't not watch your smart TV. But what we can do is we can begin to consolidate as a society and lobby against these things and make sure that these things become illegal. They don't need to be watching us. It doesn't need to be happening. And we can, as a society, if we actually manage to depolarize and come together as one unit, we can actually lobby enough to get these people to stop watching us and to stop categorizing our information and to give us back a reasonable expectation of privacy. So, I know I've covered a lot in a short period of time, and it's probably confusing to a lot of people. But in the meantime, what I'd like to see happen, and what I'm going to do, is my wife and I are going to try to take a day here and there, and we're going to try to disconnect completely. And even if I have to put my cell phone in the microwave, because it is a Faraday cage, it won't be able to get signal, it probably won't be able to hear what you're saying. If we got to put our cell phones in the microwave, then that's what we'll do. And, just turn off the Wi-Fi, turn off your internet, unplug your devices, turn off your computer, and live your life for a little while as an autonomous human being and see what it feels like. And understand that through that short period of time that you've created where you're not online and you're not connected, the thing that you have gained out of that, again, is a reasonable expectation of privacy. And privacy is important, people. I mean, it really is. It's the fundamental aspect of liberty, and it's the fundamental aspect of freedom. Without privacy, you can't have liberty. Without privacy, you can't have freedom. So the third thing I'd like to talk about real quick, and I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time with this, is Edward Snowden himself. As I said, he's been exiled. He's in Russia. He's not a Russian spy. He's refused to work with those guys. But he has to have a place to live, and they've granted him asylum there. We need to work diligently and hard to make sure that guys like him, whistleblowers who turn in the governments and the organizations that do things like this to us, we need to make darn sure that those guys are not prosecuted and charges are not brought against them, but they're brought before maybe, a Senate committee and given an opportunity to tell their story and given an opportunity to plead their case. And at least that much we owe to Edward Snowden for helping us out and letting us know that these programs even exist, because without him, we may not know, and we may continue over a period of time to become less and less and less autonomous and more and more connected and more surveilled by a government that doesn't deserve that. So, in closing, I just want to say thanks for watching. I've got some good guests coming back on here pretty soon. We've just been on hiatus. I've been working pretty hard at this podcast. Been going on for about a year now, and we've been doing pretty good, and looking forward to the second year of rolling along with it. But we just needed a break, so we decided to take off a couple of weeks, and that's why you guys haven't seen any content. But we're coming back, and I'm probably going to talk a little bit more about privacy and a little bit more about security, and maybe give you guys some pointers on what you can do to make sure that these guys don't surveil you to death. And if you do feel like you're under surveillance, what you can do. And, we'll cover some of that stuff. And in the meantime, in between time, again, I appreciate you for watching, and I think I'll be out for today, and look forward to seeing you again. And we'll have Mark Hogan back in here again in about a week, and who knows, he might be carrying a pair of antlers or something with him. Anyway, thanks a lot, guys, and we'll be out.